Good evening, and thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Carbonetta, and this is Arroyo Live. This program is produced by and through the facilities of the Pasadena media, and although the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic served as the inspiration for this program's creation, our ever-changing world continues to bring new relevance to the forum it presents. And so it is the continued hope to help bring together and strengthen our community through informative and meaningful conversation. This program is live if you are watching on Tuesday, July 21st, and there will be an opportunity to call in with questions or comments later on in the program. You can submit them anytime via email at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org. Tonight we look at how COVID-19 has affected one of America's most recognizable annual events, the 2021 Tournament of Roses, also known as the Rose Parade. I'm fortunate to be joined by Mr. David Eads, Executive Director and CEO, and Mr. Bob Miller, President of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses. On behalf of Mr. George Falardo, Executive Director of Pasadena Media, as well as the Executive Producer of this show, and for myself, I thank you both for joining me and welcome you both to the program. I'd like to take a moment to ask each of you to please tell our viewers a little bit about yourselves. David, let's begin with you.
Certainly. Thank you, Joe. I'm David Eads. I'm the Executive Director and CEO with the Tournament of Roses. I've been with the tournament now for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, I was in Los Angeles working with the Chamber of Commerce. So I've lived in Southern California for approximately 20 years. And prior to that, I grew up in the Midwest in Wichita, Kansas.
All right. And I'm Bob Miller, and I am the President and Chairman of the Board of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses Association this year. I'm a approximately 37-year member of the association, having joined the association in 1984. My family moved out here from New York City in 1969 when I was, I think, around 13 or 14 years old. So my wife and I have both been residents of the Pasadena area, Pasadena primarily, for the last 50 years. Whereas David is our CEO and Executive Director and runs the staff side of our operation, I, if you will, run the volunteer side as the President of the association this year.
All right. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us this evening. I know this is a topic that is near and dear to the hearts of many, not only in the city of Pasadena, but across the country and perhaps around the world. As is something of a tradition on our program now, the way we generally like to open it up is to always ask each of our guests their personal experiences with COVID-19 and the way life has gone as a result of it. Knock on wood, most of our guests so far don't have a personal encounter with it, but it's certainly caused a change in everyone's lifestyles and behaviors. So I would like to ask the same of both of you gentlemen. How has COVID-19 impacted you on a personal level?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. On a personal level, thank goodness our family has not yet been directly impacted by this. However, my mom, who is now 90, is a resident of the Kensington Kensington Healthcare Facility. And fortunately, that facility has not had any significant impact by the COVID virus yet. It's in Sierra Madre. They do an excellent job, but it's been difficult not being able to see my mom for the past several months, although my wife and I stay in constant contact with her. So, it's one thing to have a loved one in a long-term care facility. It's another thing not to be able to have any contact with them. So my heart goes out to all folks who are experiencing a similar situation right now. That's on a personal level. On the tournament side, as the president, the line that I like to use, I heard a few months ago, is if you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plan. So, of course, this year, the plan that Barbara, my wife, and I had was to be the ambassadors-in-chief for the Tournament of Roses Association across our great country and several places around the world. And it turns out God had a very different plan for us this year. So we are working his plan and actively engaged in it. And the one thing about being a member of the association for 37 years and a tournament member and a white suitor in general is You learn how to adapt, and you learn how to be flexible. And this year we've experienced that whole situation on a level that none of us as tournament members ever expected.
You know, and forgive me, I don't mean to interrupt you, David, but a quick question for you, Bob. I'm not 100% familiar with how it works with the Tournament of Roses, but I'm given to understand that each year there's a new president for the Tournament of Roses. Is that how that goes?
Yes, that's correct. The normal way for membership, and by the way, we have 935 members of our association, is we have 2-year appointments to each committee. The first year is a learn, the second year is a do, and that's how we maintain our continuity and work with our staff over the decades. If you are fortunate enough to work your way all the way up to what we call the executive committee, you have an 8-year rise to the presidency. So there, it's a 1-year assignment, if you will. So I've been a member of the executive committee now for 7 years. I'm on my 8th year, and in the 8th year, you become president. And then in the 9th year, you're the past president. So it's a 1-year assignment, but it starts really 8 years prior. You're a vice president for 4 years. Then you're the secretary, the treasurer, the executive vice president, then the president, and then you're the past president. So it's just part of our system, if you will.
The question that leads me to is, and I hate to use this now often quoted phrase of unprecedented times, but it really does fit here. Everything about this year is unprecedented, including what has actually, the fate that has befallen the Tournament of Roses for the 2021 year. So my question was, is there a do-over for you? I mean, or is this it? Because there really isn't a Rose Parade per se this year. So what happens now? Do you get to do it again next year? Maybe when hopefully things get back to normal?
Right. I have a little bit of a smile on my face because that's the natural second question. Now that we've answered the first question about whether there'll be a Rose Parade, the second question is what happens next year? And the answer to that is that, again, because of our structure, we were able as an executive committee to make a decision that all of our members, their 2021 assignments leading up to and culminating on January 1, 2021, would roll over to our next year, the 21-22, and end on January 1st of 2022. So that decision was made for our roughly 910 members. We've got a total of 935 members. But for the 14 members of our executive committee, it requires an amendment to our bylaws. So we as an executive committee have voted to recommend to our board of directors that the full executive committee does roll to the 21-22 year. There's a special meeting of our board of directors that's scheduled for later this month where this topic will be considered by our board and voted on. So the answer to your question is, I very well could be the past president next year, which is our normal routine, or I may have the opportunity to do this again, depending on the decision of our board of directors. It's a lengthy answer. I apologize for that, but that's the answer.
No, that's fine. And assuming that you would like to have an opportunity to be the president during and oversee a normal Rose Parade, we will certainly keep our fingers crossed that works out for you. Now, Mr. Eads, I apologize for having interrupted you. You were about to answer our question about how COVID-19 has affected you on a more personal level, and I did not mean to derail that, but it was an obvious follow-up question to something Bob had just mentioned. So I apologize again, and if you would please go ahead and answer how that has affected you.
Sure. No, I think COVID's affected me like most people. It's, we didn't see it coming. It took us by surprise. We thought it was going to be around for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we get back to normal. And obviously now, 4 months, 5 months into it, we're still being impacted greatly. So like everybody, we all have to be flexible and patient in dealing with this, with both our inabilities to visit our families or see our friends, to obey the stay-at-home orders, and really just do what we can to prevent the spread. I mean, it's important that we all play that role. And that's what I've tried to do. I'm one of those people, I love the outdoors. I love working out, going to the gym. love going out, eating out with friends, and those things have been sidelined for now. But we're all part of the solution, and that solution says we're much safer at home. And so that's really what I've tried to do, and that's kind of been how I've made my way through the past 4 months of the pandemic.
All right. Well, that was a very, very brief answer. And again, I apologize. I hope I didn't affect your response based on having interrupted the question initially. Moving back in the direction of the Rose Parade itself, and it's there are so many questions, and I'm not even sure where to begin, but I guess we'll try and begin at the beginning. The pandemic really rose to the forefront of just about everything in approximately the middle of March. And we saw the initial shutdown not long after that. And obviously, as everybody's aware of the history, things began to slack off a bit. Then we had the protest situation. And now all of a sudden we're seeing a massive resurgence of the virus. There have even been discussions now that there's actually more than one variant of the virus. But it hasn't been up until really just about a week ago that the decision was officially made to cancel the upcoming Rose Parade, the 2021 Tournament of Roses. What was the final straw, if you will, that finally precipitated that decision?
Well, let me start, and I know Bob will add to this. We start planning the parade immediately after we finish, our parade this year. So back in February, we started planning again around the 11-month schedule. A lot of people will think that, we put the parade together in 2 or 3 months, but it takes much longer time to do that. And as Bob mentioned, our 935 volunteers really work year-round in producing the parade. So when this hit in March, again, our first reaction was to monitor the situation. We closed our office, again, obeyed the stay-at-home or the safer-at-home orders, and we thought we'd be back to normal in 4 or 5 weeks. And as the situation continued to develop then, obviously we started to have concerns about what could this mean for the parade. And as you saw events start to cancel for the spring and then into the summer, it really became apparent to us that this was going to be something much serious and could affect us in the long run. So again, as the CEO, I started then working with, health officials at LA County, working with the city manager and the health director for the city of Pasadena. I was in contact with the governor's office in Sacramento. Again, trying to understand the governor's reopening plan, his different stages, and again, identifying us as a stage 4 event, that has mass gatherings, could be considered a super spreader event. And when might California be back in a stage 4 reopening that would allow for the parade? And so for the past 2 months then, we've really been working with all these different entities to really assess where the parade stood. At the same time, planning continued for this year's parade. Our volunteers continued to work on floats and selling floats for the parade. Our bands are selected 18 months in advance, so work continued with our bands on their arrangements to participate in this year's parade. And we even opened up our portal for applications for equestrian units. So planning was continuing all through March and April and May and into June, as if we were going to have a parade. We didn't want to fall behind. But we also realized we had to look at our expenditures because the last thing we want to do is spend a lot of money and then not be able to recoup it if we had to cancel the parade. So we actually did not start building floats. We held on building floats, which you typically start in March, up until the end of June. And that's what was one of the factors driving the decision is, flowers for our floats have to be ordered in June and July because those are sourced out of South America, and literally millions of blooms have to be ordered. Our floats have to be constructed. Our bands have to make arrangements to travel to Pasadena, to secure airline contracts and busing contracts. So they have expenditures that are due. And so we waited really as long as we could to make a decision, but we knew we would have to make it here in early July just because of all these factors. And that's what really led us then to our announcement last week that we would just be unable to host the parade. And as part of that decision then to ensure we had all the facts and we're making the best decision that we could, because again, our number one priority was always going to be the safety of the public, the safety of our participants, the safety of our volunteers. That had to be our first priority as we looked at the future of the parade. And a study that we commissioned with USC Keck School of Medicine to look at would California be in stage 4 reopening on January 1st really came back and said, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be possible based on what's happening currently with COVID spread. So that really became the basis for us making our decision that we would have to cancel the parade for January 1st of 2021.
And I'll add a few things to that. In David's career and in my career, I spent, in fact, I just recently retired, but I spent 42 years in community college administration at relatively senior levels, including stints as my last job as a vice chancellor of finance for LA Community College District. And I was at Pasadena City College for about 23 years over 2 different stints, including as their interim superintendent and president. And one of the things that experience taught me is how to handle crisis and crisis management. And a part of the process of doing that is communication and full disclosure and having detailed, doing your homework from a research point of view and sharing information with decision makers so that the decision makers are ready to make the tough decisions when the time comes. So thanks to David's great leadership, my participation and others, we created what we call the 2021 Rose Parade and Rose Bowl game decision timeline that actually started back in April, and it ran through our decision-making date of no parade. And in that timeline was all the touch points that we had to be engaged in terms of our own internal process with all of our standing committees and our operating committees and the communications that we needed to have internally as well as externally. There are upwards of 6,000 people who participate in our parade every year in terms of people that actually go down the street, so to speak, as we like to say. Behind those 6,000 people are thousands of others who work with them and support them and get them to where they need to be. Everything from band parents, as an example, equestrian support, all of the corporate entities, the nonprofits, the for-profits, the self-built float builders, and those that sponsor all of our roughly 45 floats a year that we have on board. And it's a giant machine, if you will. So one of the things that David and I and our executive committee and so many others have had to do is we had to manage the machine and if you will, the disaggregation of everything that it takes to put a parade down the street, and to make sure that we made our final decision in a timely enough fashion so that all of our partners were not impacted from a economic perspective in a negative way. So that was also a significant part of the process. But as David indicated, the final determiner really was the assessment document that the USC Keck School of Medicine did for us, which essentially said that if our number one goal was public health and safety, and it is, there really was no way that we could host a 2021 parade this year. And that was the final determining. And I will tell you that it was obviously a unanimous decision by our executive committee. And in the over 200 personal emails, text messages, and what have you I've gotten, not one person felt that the decision was the wrong decision. They were all disappointed, but not one felt that it was the wrong decision to make.
Well, you do mention, of course, the extreme importance of safety to the public and to all of those who participate in the parade itself, and certainly the financial aspects and the potential risks cannot be ignored either. But all of that out of the way, all of the mechanics of getting a parade ready to go or not getting a parade ready to go aside, it could not have been an easy decision to have to make, because the parade has such a personal meaning to really just about everybody. Certainly in Pasadena, across the country, probably again, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say around the world, so many families get together as a tradition on New Year's morning and watch the parade. There are so many people who participate in the festivities on New Year's Eve on the boulevard. And of course, the stands are packed every year. I'm certain there are waiting lists to get seats at the parade. And then, of course, there are all the people who practice all year long to participate in the parade, and all the businesses that are touched either by making materials for the parade or sponsoring the parade. So it must have been a difficult decision for you and your staff to make. And I wonder if you both would speak on that just a little bit.
Go ahead if you want to go first.
No, we are this honored American tradition. I'm one of those people that grew up in the Midwest, and it was our family tradition every year to watch the Rose Parade. When I moved to Southern California, it was the first thing I wanted to do was actually see it live. It was one of those bucket list items. And for people all over the country, that's what they will do is save for years just to be able to come to Pasadena and be part of this spectacle of bringing in the new year with this hope and joy that the Rose Parade brings to people. So, that weighed heavy on us. We understood the impact that we were having on people, not just locally, but nationally and globally. And then there's also the economic impact. We do economic impact studies every 2 to 3 years, and especially at a time when business is hurting, small businesses hurting in Pasadena, us canceling the parade has a huge impact on our hoteliers, on restaurants, on shops, on revenue, not just for the city of Pasadena, but for the region. We have a $200 to $300 million direct economic impact to the region every year. So that, again, was a huge consideration. And then also for the tournament itself and our volunteers. Our volunteers dedicate years and years and years, as Bob mentioned, 37-year member, to work every year on this parade, and to not have the parade happen really affects them, for what they've dedicated to our organization. So all of these considerations came into play. But at the end of the day, it's the health directive that we really have to follow. And the last thing we wanted to do was plan a parade and move forward with planning, and then in October, November, December being told you can't host a parade. That wouldn't be fair to our participants. That wouldn't be fair to our volunteers or to us. And so, we didn't make this decision. It was really made for us. And that decision was made by the COVID virus that is just currently not in control. We're not going to be in a stage 4 reopening. And so we would not be allowed to host the parade. That was just the reality. So, as I've said, we're all disappointed with this decision. It is not the decision that we wanted to make, but it was the right decision for all of us that are involved in it, for all of our participants.
Yeah. And I will tell you, to add to that, clearly there were stages and periods of denial that some people went through. I can remember, talking to David in our offices, and both of us saying, "Oh, this is the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it'll come, it'll go." But in the end, it really was the virus has a mind of its own, if you will, if I could use that phrase, and we had to deal with the reality. And one thing that the tournament is good at is dealing with reality. At the end of the day, what I've said to countless numbers of colleagues and friends and tournament members and what have you, in reality, on a scale of 1 to 10, with the millions of people that have been impacted by COVID, the death, the illness, Lord knows what the long-standing effects of this could be, the financial impact, everything from financial ruin to certainly financial destruction. You put all that in perspective and you compare that to our parade, and you realize that it's a parade. It's a fantastic parade. We love it. It is, it is America's New Year's celebration. It is the premier floral parade around the world. It's fantastic. But at the end of the day, you have to do the responsible thing for the community. And David, you can speak to that. Our conversations with the city and the city manager, Steve Mermel, have always been quite professional and appropriate and good, because we all could have put the economic, what I like to call, and what Steve Mermel also calls, you've got the socioeconomic part of this thing versus the public health and safety. So there's a tension between the socio and the economic versus the public safety. And in the end, from our perspective, public safety had to win out. Notwithstanding all of the issues from a sociological and an economic reality or fallout that will occur, in the end, we had to do the most responsible thing. So once we got past the stages of denial and anger and all of those kinds of things, and once we continued to review the research every day, David gets tired of the amount of emails and text messages that I send him with article attachments of this, that, or the other thing, and I share with our colleagues. But it was not only the right thing to do, it was the logical, well-informed research thing to do.
All right. Well, it's clearly, I think we've stated, it's a massive undertaking to put this parade on annually. As I think you gentlemen have both mentioned, the planning really begins in the very early stages of the new year. You know, almost immediately in February, you're already working on next year's parade.
Joe, let me interrupt you just by saying, planning for any one parade these days could start 2, 3, 4 years earlier, depending on what the theme of what that president, what she or he is interested in. And typically the planning for a parade really starts at least 18 to 20 months prior, at least, and often even before that. So it's a lot. It's a big deal. It's a big undertaking.
All right. That I appreciate that. And I'm certain that our viewers at home do as well. That having been said, I think it is also worth noting that in the history of the Rose Parade, it's actually only been canceled one other time, and that was during World War II. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were actually 3 years during World War II that the parade was not held. So that was 42, 43, and 45. Obviously, the war was going on, the war effort. There wasn't, materials to build floats, those type of things. And actually, in the 1 year in 44, it was a token parade. It was a couple cars with some flowers that just drove down Colorado Boulevard. So really, there was no parade for about 4 years during World War II. So this is the first time the parade's been canceled in 75 years.
And what's also interesting about this is that, people say that there's a precedent for this. Well, 75 years ago, the circumstances were entirely different in this sense. Obviously, we had the war, we had the situation with Japan, we had the possibility of the bombing of the West Coast, we had all those kinds of things. But we also, once we were able to sort of get that under control, we had the ability for our activities to some degree to happen, for our royal court to go out and actually speak with people and visit people and break bread with people. This year, given the type of situation we're dealing with here, we cannot have any significant physical contact with any entity for any of our events. So our events are not just the parade. We have a number of events during the week that precedes the parade, including our Band Fest and our Quest Fest. Then we have our major event afterwards, post-parade. We have our decorating places. And all that requires human interaction. And as a result of COVID-19, human interaction as we know it doesn't exist. Social distancing is a requirement. The ability to bring masses of people together is completely untenable. During World War II and in that situation, you could still do all those things. So here we are in 2020, leading to 2021, and we can't do anything of that nature. David, am I overstating it, or Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, Bob. I mean, we are about bringing people together. That's what we do, and celebrate together in that kind of joyous situation. And again, right now, that's kind of been taken from us. So, we're living in a virtual world, and we've tried to do some things already this year. Virtually, we hosted what we called our Rosebud Parade. It was a virtual parade for kids to build floats at homes with their parents. Again, giving kids an activity when all of a sudden parents were schooling kids at home back in March and April. We thought we would get 30, 40 submissions for this parade that we streamed on Facebook Live, and we ended up getting over 230 submissions. Again, people really wanted an outlet to be creative and to show creativity and to work together as a family. And so, again, that was a new extension of what we've done, but that had to be done, again, virtually and kind of in isolation, right? Family isolation. We were not able to bring crowds together. So, our challenge as we look at the remainder of this year is, how do we remain relevant? How do we still continue with some type of New Year's Day celebration? But it's going to look totally different. It's not going to be a parade. It's not going to be something with a mass gathering. That's just not possible. But we are excited about some of the opportunities that are in front of us, that we will be able to bring that hope and joy of the new year to people both locally as well as across our country, as we approach January 1st.
All right. Well, gentlemen, before we continue, I would like to take this opportunity to tell our viewers at home that we have reached the halfway point of our program, and that means that our phone lines are now also open. So if you would like to call in with a question or comment, you can reach us at area code 951-356-6882, and we will take your call or comment over the air. That having been noted, we also have a couple of viewers that have been watching online and have contributed already via our Facebook chat. One of those viewers writes that, quote, "I hope the tournament will try to have something online. I look forward to the parade every year. It would be nice to have something online to distract from the pandemic." Another viewer also writes, "Do you have a plan to do anything online?" So, gentlemen, I guess the next obvious question is, were there or have there been or are there alternatives being considered prior to and now that the Rose Parade has been canceled?
Yeah, let me start. One of the goals that David and I had in our timeline was to get to where we got to so we could focus on going forward. We could focus on what we're going to do over the next 5.5, 6 months, and focus on what we're going to do after that, including the parade for January 1, 2022, where, quite frankly, we don't even know exactly where we're going to be vis-a-vis COVID-19 even by that time. So that being said, part of our plan includes mobilizing our members, mobilizing our committees to create a number of experiences that will enhance, if you will, the partnership and the presence that the Tournament of Roses Association has in our community. So that includes a number of events that will be different from that which we typically do during the year. That will be very stream worthy, that will be very social media worthy, that will be very engaging, that will celebrate America's New Year celebration and celebrate our great community. We should not forget that in the midst of our pandemic, we had the terrible situation relative to the racial inequalities and the social justice issues that we suffered with George Floyd and other issues. And we as an association have a responsibility to work with the community to help address those issues. We have the needs of our first responders. We have the needs of our essential workers. We have the needs of those who are impacted by this from a food insecurity and other perspective. And look to the association over the next 6 months to engage in a variety of activities that basically indicate that we are here, we have been here for 132 years, we're going to be here for another 132 years, and we want to be actively engaged with the health and well-being and the fabric of our community. So you're going to see things from us in your future that speak to that. We're not necessarily ready to announce those now, but I can assure you that we are actively pursuing a variety of, I think, some great ideas, and we've got a lot of people power ready to implement those ideas.
All right. The next question deals more with the financial side of the parade. It has been estimated, and you can perhaps tell us whether this is close to accurate or wildly off base, but I've read a report that estimates that the collective revenue from the parade, I guess for the city, approximates about $238 million annually. With no parade no physical parade taking place this year. How is that going to affect the city and the businesses that that gain from the presence of the parade?
Sure, yeah. The number you're referring to is kind of our direct economic impact. It's not necessarily just dollars, but it's impact based on the parade and all the activities that we do, as well as the Rose Bowl game. So obviously, without the parade this year, we're not going to have people traveling to Pasadena. And when they come for the parade, they're not just spending 1 or 2 nights. They're spending 5 or 6 nights, and they're eating in restaurants. They're making purchases at retailers. They're going to see attractions. And they're not just in Pasadena, right? They're visiting the beach communities. They're going to Disneyland. They're at Universal Studios Hollywood. We become a vacation destination over that New Year's holiday. So that will be lost this year. We will not have those crowds. We are still hopeful that we will have a football game this year. The fate of college football in the fall has not been determined. And this year we are a semifinal site as part of the college football playoff. Again, if we do have a game, it will be played within all the restrictions and orders from both the state of California and the CDC. And whether that's limited fans in the stands or no fans in the stands, we don't know yet. But if we're able to do a game, there'll be small economic impact, again, from people that are coming in for that game. But it comes at the worst of times when business is suffering in Pasadena, especially small business. Restaurants, hotels have been closed. It would have been great for us to be able to host a parade and generate that economic impact for the region. But that's not possible for us. So again, we will be back, and we will be back strong. And that's what our focus on right now is, the focus on the future. Again, as Bob mentioned, we will be celebrating New Year's Day in Pasadena. We're still finalizing what that's going to look like. And that would be for both locally as well as our national audience. And we're excited about what these new opportunities are from both digital platforms and working with our broadcast partners and locally as well. So we're not going away, but we will not have the economic impact that we've traditionally brought to the community every year.
No, and I think to append on to this, this has had a massive economic impact on our association as well. Basically, on the game side, all of our revenue sources, for the most part, disappeared. We had to cut millions of dollars from our budget this year. We had significant impact on our staff, which hurts us as an organization and hurts them as individuals. Collectively, we too are sharing in the pain of the economic fallout of our decision and on the world in general. So again, not easy decisions, but at the end of the day, from a fiduciary point of view, we need to maintain a strong balance sheet, reasonable reserves, so that we can make certain that we're in a position to have another 132 years of parades and games. So it was hard on us as well.
Will the loss of revenue from what should have been the 2021 parade have an impact on the 2022 parade?
David, do you want to take a shot at that?
Again, we'll see what 2022 delivers to us. Our hope is that we make it through this pandemic into next year. We're able to start planning for a parade, in February of next year. We're able to do our typical, float acquisitions with our float participants. We're able to move forward with our corporate sponsors on their deliverables. And financially, that will be a solid organization operating in the black. I mean, that's, we're a nonprofit. We have to operate just like any business, with a financial balance sheet that's correct. So that is our goal. Again, we're going to have to be flexible, though. We don't know what 2022 is going to bring. And if we're not through this pandemic and we're still in a safer at home order and social distancing and no mass gatherings, then again, we're going to have to relook at what that year looks like and make adjustments accordingly. But, we're very hopeful, obviously, again, with the science that's out there, learning more about the virus every day and how to control it. Again, the use of facial coverings, the washing of hands, social distancing, all of those type of things are helping to stop the spread. And as a country and as a nation, if we can get, to next year and have this under control, then we're very hopeful that we can return to a sense of normal. Again, what is normal next year will be totally different than what was normal a year ago. We know it'll be a new normal, but that is our goal and that is our hope, that we can return to a semi-regular parade year for 2022.
And the one thing that we know for sure, Joe, is that the world wants us, needs us, misses us. And our responsibility to the country, to our community and to the country and to the world, is to bring back as much of our parade as we can, because it's a touchstone for so many. So one of the reasons why we made some of the really difficult financial decisions from an organization's point of view is to make sure that we've got enough of a glide path, enough of a runway to manage this over a 2 or 3 year period. God forbid it should take that long to resolve itself. So we've made some prudent financial decisions that extend 24 months and even some would say 36 months out.
Well, I believe earlier on in the program, you gentlemen mentioned that a lot of the flowers and greenery that we see in the parade each year are outsourced, some of it coming from other countries. What is the long-term impact to those suppliers that there is no parade this year? Will that hurt them next year? Will it make it more difficult for you to source those materials, assuming the parade can commence again in 2022?
Yeah, I don't think our float builders, and they're the ones obviously that are sourcing those materials for the floats, are concerned about the availability of flowers in the future. But you have to remember, this is a global pandemic, and it's also hurt the countries where we grow flowers. A lot of them, again, are coming out of South America, out of Ecuador, or if they're tropicals, they might be coming out of Thailand or Southeast Asia. And all these countries have been impacted by COVID. And so even this year, there was concerns about their ability to source flowers because the demand for flowers had dropped so quickly that some of the flower fields were not planted and would even be available later this year. So again, we think of this as a small parade or a big parade in Pasadena, but it really is a global event. And as we put this together, we're dependent on global supply chains. But I think, people are hopeful that we'll be back to that semblance of normal, and materials like flowers would be available for the 2022 parade.
Okay, so again, putting together the parade is a massive undertaking, and it requires an awful lot of staff. I believe a lot of them are volunteers. But the obvious question then is, what happens to all of that staff if there's no parade?
So from the tournament's point of view, we have a staff of approximately 33, 34 people. Every one of our staff members has been impacted by this. And so we've had some furloughs, we've had some layoffs, we've had reduction in the amount of hours that staff are working. So there's impact starting right at the home base, if you will. That radiates out to every one of our vendors, every one of our builders, every one of our suppliers, every one of those entities that we have contracts with. And it hurts. It hurts. And so the decision that we had to make, in other words, socioeconomic versus public safety and health, we chose public safety and health. And to one of all of the organizations that have been financially impacted by this, including individuals, people who are just on somebody's payroll, all of the notes that I've gotten have understood, all right? They all get it. And more than the economic loss, they miss the camaraderie. They miss the socialization. They miss the incredible undertaking that it is to put the parade together and to be part of that. And as a volunteer, and again, we have 935 volunteers, all of us as white suiters, we do it because we love it and we're doing something unique and different. And that radiates to all of our vendors and suppliers and the people who decorate our floats and the people who build our floats. It's there, and it's that that sense of community, that's probably the biggest feeling of loss right now, even beyond the economic hurt.
And I would add to that, Bob, that to your point, Joe, I don't think we're going to lose volunteers. I think people are going to be extremely energized to come back and really work with us on next year's parade, on the 2022 parade. Even this year, we had concerns with volunteers, and our float builders had expressed that to us, that a lot of our volunteers that decorate our floats are over the age of 60, 65. They're retired. They love to come out at the holidays and do this. And would they even feel safe in an environment where, again, you typically have hundreds of people in very close, confined space decorating a float? And again, that was one of our considerations, that we couldn't decorate floats in a safe environment. And because these are live florals, it's not that we can apply, spread out the volunteer schedule and rather do it over 3 or 4 days. We do it over 2 or 3 months. A live bloom is not going to last that long. So there was concern this year for just, again, the safety of our volunteers and would they even show up? But to Bob's point, these people love this parade. This is part of the fabric of the community. They love coming out and volunteering in it. And yes, it's disappointing we won't have a parade, but we really believe that they'll show up in droves for the 2022 parade, and really help us recover from this pandemic year.
And perhaps the last point on the economic impact, one of the reasons why we had to make the decision when we did is because we were at a point where builders had to order flowers. We were at a point where builders had to order steel. We were at a point where bands had to put deposits down for hotels and airlines and what have you. And to minimize the economic impact, we had to make the decision in July as opposed to roll the dice and hope that there wasn't another resurgence in November, October, and then have to cancel the parade then, and then have the massive economic impact of all of the dollars that had already been spent and contracts signed that had to then be filled. So, horrible decision on the financial side, but also by making the decision earlier, we saved even more financial loss and ruin.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the economic impact again, because that does bring up one other interesting question, and that is that for most of the major networks, at least here in the U.S., the Rose Parade is a very, very big deal. Most of the major networks will at least cover the initial parade with very few, and in one case at least, no commercials whatsoever. And there is one network that rebroadcasts the parade over and over again for the entire day, presumably because there's quite a bit of financial gain for them in doing that as well. What is the impact to the network, and perhaps even a bigger question, did the networks have any influence on the decision? Was there any pushback from the decision to cancel the parade?
Sure. We have a terrific partnership with all of our broadcast partners, the networks. And when COVID first hit, obviously we were in touch with them. Television today has been greatly impacted, right? We're all watching reruns and there's been no new production being held, again, due to health and safety regulations. So, the networks have been impacted already. They weren't really even thinking about January 1st. They're trying to get through their spring and summer schedule. So we have been having ongoing conversations with our broadcast partners about what New Year's Day might look like. And as much as we want to showcase, what we do every year as part of America's New Year celebration, they want to be able to showcase that too. So, our discussions will continue about what happens on January 1st. Again, lots of details to be worked through and what that might look like. And so we don't have anything here to announce today, but they've been terrific working with us and understanding that this is really out of our control. There was no pressure on their part, towards us on what we should do or the decision that we would make. But we've been in constant communication with them. We have a terrific relationship with them. We're one of the few events that is broadcast today that has multi-network partners, and that's extremely important to us. And we'll continue to work with them as we work through the remainder of the year.
We're very fortunate that we have somewhere between 35 million and 40 million domestic viewers on New Year's morning. So they're excellent partners of ours. We're excellent partners of theirs, and they have been, as David said, very, very good to work with as we worked our way through this decision.
Well, gentlemen, traditionally, each year the Rose Parade has a different theme, and that is the overriding factor in float design. Bob, I think at the top of the show we discussed the possibility that this year's tournament staff will hopefully roll over to next year's tournament staff in light of the fact that the parade has, I wonder if canceled is the correct term. Maybe it would be more appropriate to say postponed until next year. And so the question is it likely that this year's theme will also roll over into the next parade, or will it be an all new theme?
Well, obviously that's been a topic of significant thought and discussion. In many ways, we at the association see this year not only as a challenge, but as an opportunity. And the opportunity is to convey to the world not just a local theme, but this notion that our parade is America's New Year's celebration. And our parade is representative of strength and perseverance. And this year, perhaps, if you will, healthy new beginnings. So as the president this year, with the theme that my wife and I chose, Dream, Believe, Achieve, with a focus on celebrating education, it's my personal belief that maybe that theme needs to be put aside. And if I'm fortunate enough to be the president next year, if our board of directors makes the determination that our full executive committee is going to roll, then Dream, Believe, Achieve, Celebrate Education would begin anew, if you will, January 2nd of 2021, leading up to a culminating event of our parade on January 1 of 2022. That being said, and if we go, and that doesn't happen, then perhaps Dream, Believe, Achieve, Celebrate Education goes down in the history books of a parade and a theme that just didn't go down the street. As the 2 or 3 parades during World War II, there were themes that didn't go down the street. But if I were the king, and I'm not, I'm part of a very democratic organization here, I would put our theme, Dream, Believe, Achieve, into 22. I think there's a good chance that's going to happen, but the short answer is it's not been totally determined yet.
All right, that's a fair enough answer. We're coming close to the end of our program, but we do have a few more quick questions. One of which is, as you mentioned earlier, when we get back to quote-unquote normal at some point, it will probably not be the same normal that we had a few years ago. Are there plans being put in place now for a time when the Rose Parade can actually proceed down the street again? And what changes are we likely to see at that point? How will the new Rose Parade post-COVID-19 look like?
Yeah, I think, we're going to have to look at what that parade looks like in the light of COVID. Again, we might have under control, but we still might have certain distancing rules. Again, safety precautions, things like hand washing stations, all those type of things that now we're not doing 6 months ago, but we're doing today will become part of our new normal. And so as we continue to now look to the future and make plans, all of that will have to be taken into consideration. Again, traffic pattern flows and all those type of things will be important to us. So absolutely, as we work and our committees plan on our various events for the future, we have to do it in the light of COVID. The virus might go away, but its impact will still remain, and we're going to have to view everything through that lens.
And I'll add, we have been subject to the governor's executive order, to the orders of the LA County Public Health Department, and to the City of Pasadena Public Health Department. And as we have through the process that we've engaged in to date that brought us to the decision that we made, it was driven in a great deal by those guidelines as put forth by the governor's office, the county, and the city. Going forward, I'm sure we'll have the same requirements to deal with. We're not an island in and of ourselves, so we do what we need to do.
Okay. In these last couple of minutes here in the program, another question that I'm sure a lot of our viewers will really appreciate the answer to. What happens with the 2021 Rose Queen and her court? Will they get an opportunity to make an appearance in the 2022 parade if, in fact, we are fortunate enough to be back on track by then?
Well, David's smiling at me and I'm smiling back at him, but I'll just say that our Queen and Court traditions and how that will play out for 2021 is the next big topic that we are working through right now. So we have a Queen and Court committee chaired by Steve Perry, and one of our executive committee members is a coordinator, Terry Madigan, and between Steve and Terry and that committee, they are developing some options, if you will, for our Queen and Court traditions this year, working very closely with David and his staff. So stay tuned on that one as well. We're still working our way through that. David, anything else you want to add to that?
I was going to say, no matter what we do, again, it's going to look different. It's going to be a virtual court for the most part. They can't go out and represent us ambassadors physically. The issues of now PUSD schools are not even going to be in session, at least to start the fall. And so, as we work with the school districts, we do the tryouts, everything, if we were to move forward with the Queen and Court, it will look much, much different. Their roles and responsibilities will be much, much different. But it is a long-standing tradition, and we are evaluating what that could look like in this world of COVID that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I'll just tag this very quickly. Traditions to the Tournament of Roses are very, very important. That being said, we have modified our traditions over the years for what's good for the community as well as ourselves. However, the Queen and Court it's a very sensitive tradition in our community, and we want to be respectful of it and do the best that we can. But David's right. Our ability to even have the court act in the manner that courts act is truncated in a dramatic way this year. So part of our discussion is really what's the best way to go about this.
All right. And is there a website that people can reference if they want more information about the Rose Parade 2021 or 2022?
Certainly. They can go to our website. It's www.tournamentofroses.com. There's a host of information on the website. Also, they can get information on any of our social channels. And we encourage people to stay informed and up to date as, again, we make plans for the remainder of this year.
Well, fantastic. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we have reached the end of our program. We're out of time, but Mr. David Eads and Mr. Bob Miller, again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We truly appreciate it. We wish you all the best, and we will certainly look forward to the 2022 Tournament of Roses Parade, as well as what we will get on the 1st of 2021. To our viewers at home, if there are topics that you would like to see addressed in our discussions, you can email them to us at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org, and we may try to include them in a future broadcast. This has been Arroyo Live. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful evening.